Okay, we're into an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today, a cool update for you guys from the brand Vaer. A little about them. They were founded back in 2016 out of Venice, California, in LA County, in the good old US of A. And essentially, they started Vaer because they couldn't afford the watches they liked, and they didn't like any of the watches that they could afford. So they used their life savings to bring their vision of the perfect everyday watch to life, expanding now to the point to where they're even offering proudly American assembled options as well as American tested options, which I can absolutely appreciate. In terms of the type of watch, guys, this is a traveler's watch. Some key commentaries and design what you're looking for a traveler's watch. Of course, you're going to want to see some type of GMT or world time functionality, so you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is their G5 Meridian in the navy and red colorway. It comes in at 39 millimeters, and this is a USA assembled GMT. It's a 1950s inspired 20 atmosphere automatic watch that stands out in the Vaer lineup as their most premium USA assembled model, and their first true GMT in terms of being a traveler's GMT with that independently adjustable hour hand. As you might have guessed by that Flyer GMT capability, this is powered by the Miyota 9075, which typically means that these are going to go for a bit more of a premium in terms of its price point. And you'd be right. In this case, these are going to go for $849, and that is with the $50 additional option of getting this beautiful premium Jubilee bracelet, which also does feature a premium Nodex toolless micro adjust clasp. So this thing is absolutely them swinging for the fences. Let's see how well they fare. We know from, if you're a big fan of the channel, that I've reviewed quite a few similarly spec'd pieces, but how does the execution of Vaer hold up against some of those other industry favorites? So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now obviously there are going to be some similarities for this style. Just if you just blur your eyes a little bit, you're going to see Rolex GMT Master 2. If you look a little bit closer, you're going to notice actually a lot of really, really cool Omega C Master lyre lug case details. I think this thing looks awesome. It's a really nice balance and, kind of mashup of a lot of really, really nice classic, well-aged, well-curated aesthetics. And just those little design cues, I think, flow together pretty well, guys. Let's not forget brands like Christopher Ward started out with really just doing kind of similarly, being kind of a mashup of other very nice design cues. Because as much as I like to see a watch that looks different, I don't like to see one that looks different just for the sake of being different. And I think Vaer does a good job of balancing their design aesthetics to something that feels cohesive and feels like a complete watch versus just a watch that looks like a tweaked version of something else. In this case, with this colorway, of course, though, you're going to draw comparisons to that GMT Master 2 thanks to that bezel colorway with the Pepsi style bezel that, although nobody really owns it, if anybody did, it would be Rolex with their GMT Master 2. But you can see here, guys, look at this dial. It has a really cool Tudor-like faint sunray dial, and it is black, and it is very nicely done and very subtle. That's something that you don't necessarily pick up when you're looking at this model and you're just looking at the static photos of it. So getting into some of the details, guys, 39 millimeters for the case diameter, 15.5 millimeters thick, 46 millimeters lug to lug, so very, very manageable. And you guys can see here, very organic flow to the lines here, right? So you have your mid case, you have your case back, you have your nice crown, bezel. Here's the crown that's nicely sided, full writing there. You can see written out Vaer. And of course the scallops on here, and it flows, and it does remind you of Rolex, and so does this Jubilee style bracelet. But again, I think it flows really well, and they do enough differently. I mean, the dial is very different, and then of course the sword handset, which is more a Ministry of Defense styling cue that is shared by Rolex mill subs of the past, as well as of course some Ministry of Defense spec Omegas that are really beautiful through history. So if you're gonna look like something, you might as well look like something super desirable, right? So there's some cool design. Sorry guys, I'm just giving it a quick little wipe here off camera. Make sure that we get that crystal nice and clean, so you guys can just really enjoy just how handsome this piece is. I think overall it's a handsome piece. So getting into some more of those specs, guys, you're going to have a double domed sapphire with an inner AR coating, and you guys can see nicely domed. So since it has the dome on the outside and the underside, that means there's going to be minimal distortion. Check that out. You can see that tall GMT hand stack and the dial furniture laid out and appointed really beautifully until I get to a very, very harsh angle and you look at the outer edges. Yeah, you're going to start noticing a bit of distortion, but otherwise still very clean, very clear, and very legible. Getting into this bezel, ooh, bidirectional. So they did their homework. They didn't just skimp out. I will say it is 120 clicks, somewhat harsh. I prefer to have it to be a little bit lighter on the click. This is very much heavy on the click. So some people really like that tactile engagement, and then when it's really smooth, some people might feel like that's sloppy. I like to find something a little bit in the middle where it's smooth, but you can still feel, you know, each of those little ticks along the way. Again, just gonna give it a quick wipe here, just because it is quite a glossy ceramic bezel insert, and it did have my fingerprints all over it after doing that. So bezel action, I prefer their bezel action on their diver. I recently reviewed their D5 diver, similar size case and everything like that, a little slimmer, of course, since it's not a GMT movement, but that had really, really fantastic bezel action. So I know that they're capable of dialing in that bezel action. In this case, it's just outside of my preference, but I wouldn't call it any type of or consider it to be like a shortcoming. Some people might feel this and be like, "Ooh, that's what I want. I want it to be really clicky." That's just not me. Getting into some more of these details, guys, flip it over and we get to see the nice movement there. Check that out with a little signed Vaer rotor. That's the Miyota 9075 Flyer GMT. It has a 42-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate in terms of that beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour, and even is regulated accurate to -5 to +15 seconds per day. So I think that's great, and you can see it through the display case back. Another great thing. Getting into the dial here, guys, really nice. Again, that kind of satin sun ray. It's a very mild sun ray effect there, which I think is probably the best way to do it when it comes to a black dial that's wanting to be a little bit more sporty. Nicely framed date window there at 6 o'clock, and also you do get polished sword hands, like we mentioned, painted GMT hand there, nicely done. You're gonna get Super Luminova BGW9 grade A and like 20 layers, guys. So this thing is going to be pretty well lit when it gets dark here. We get some of those transitional shots. I think you guys are gonna be pretty happy with this. 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance, 20 millimeter lugs with, guys, check this out, quick release spring bars. And I will say these are some of the nicer nubs that are on there. They're not as sharp as some of the other ones I've seen from other brands. So on this particular one, they really, when they say premium, they really did their extra homework there. And of course, really nicely done, fully articulated Jubilee style bracelet. Very nice screw pin construction. And then this very nicely appointed Vaer Nodex clasp. So the cool thing is, you see there, Nodex, you press the button, it releases it, and you can't do it. You have to press the button to do that. So it's not ratcheting, but when you set it, the nice thing is you don't have to worry about it accidentally slipping. So some people really like to have it very lockable. One thing I am, it's not perfect for me is when you can see that little gap. So I would, even though it's like a 5-position micro or 4-position, I would probably only use 3 because I would only want it to stick out that much to where you can't really notice anything. But for me, I was able to actually, thanks to these very, very short links that are essentially as short as, half links, I was already able to dial it in without any extension. So when it is on wrist, essentially, if my wrist swells, I can extend it as much as I need to. So very cool. But let's go ahead and actually get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this thing wears beautifully. Check that out. Now, it is a little bit on the thicker side, but nothing crazy, right? I mean, that 15.5 is counting that really nicely domed crystal there, and it does have some really nice organic lines to it. You might be able to flatten out the profile a little bit, maybe if they would have went with instead of a double domed crystal, maybe if they would have went to a box dome, I think that would have been really nice. But I also understand that because of the line flow there, how they have a sloped bezel insert, it does flow very nicely, right? So if this is maybe a flat bezel insert, it would be nice to see that contrast off of a box dome sapphire. So I get it. And of course, with that extra, it's just kind of byproduct of having a GMT watch is you have that extra hand there, so the hand stack does need to be taller. So I understand that, but you guys can see when it comes to the lines on this case, very organic, beautifully flowing, guys. A lot of great visual interest and play, and again, in a package that looks very classic. And does have a nice little injection of contemporary in terms of those changes that they made to really make this a piece of their own. I do like how they did those circular indices, and I've noticed that as a bit of a signature of theirs, seeing that on multiple of their models. Sometimes it's just little loom plops, and not necessarily like the full indice, but they do keep those as kind of their secondary cardinal points, and I think it looks really good, well balanced. Of course, if I keep my wrist too close to the camera here, it's just going to make the watch look much larger, as you guys can see. So I like to just keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can still get a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. Check that out. Really well proportioned, nice short compact lug to lug, nice organic case there. Everything flows really classic. And again, if you're gonna mix and match and blend iconic references, they chose some really great inspiration in this case. And the nice thing is it's also an evolution of their own designs, because that's how they started out with their dive watch. But when it comes to this GMT, they definitely have taken up those design elements, and I appreciate that they do consider this one of their top offerings. This is like a halo model for Vaer. So if you're a fan of the brand and you really enjoy some of their more affordable options, this can be kind of like that attainable grail for a lot of folks. It is very, very capable, right? You're getting essentially the same functionality from a much more expensive watch, thanks to that flyer style GMT with the independently adjustable hour hand. So very cool. Wears beautifully, guys. That taper on that bracelet, goodness, it goes down to 15.8 millimeters. The clasp itself is about 18.4. This thing is absolutely awesome. So with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Look at that. That's wild. That is extremely great loom, great cardinal referencing there, understanding where 12 o'clock is. So wonderful orientation, guys. But one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. man, this thing is awesome. And I do really like the fact that they did a black dial. That just sets it off, guys. As much as I love a good blue dial, there's something to be said about this particular layout with the black dial, the Pepsi bezel, the Jubilee bracelet. It just captures such a fun and funky aesthetic that I'm really liking. Even if we get into some harsher lighting situations, which typically could expose any types of production defects, guys, look at that dial. Man, that thing is spotless. And then you get into these beautiful links on this bracelet. The polished pieces are high polished, deep and glossy, and the satin pieces have a beautiful uniform play to them in terms of the way that the light glides right over. Also, you're going to get a lot of play off of that crystal, and some of you might like that, some of you might not, but I will say here in this case, you're going to have a lot of fun with that. And the nice thing is with the more sedate dial style, it actually does make it, you know, I think it adds to the beauty. So I dig that, guys. And still, again, super legible. Check that out. Completely pitch black and very, very nice. Ooh, this one's cool, guys. I'm digging this. So closing thoughts on the wrist. Really, you're getting that classic 40-ish millimeter diver proportions, right? 39 millimeters. I'd say, depending on where you measure from, you might even get 40 millimeters. And that is helpful in terms of spreading that weight, the visual weight of that 15.5 millimeter thickness. Again, including that double dome bezel. I'm sorry, double domed. The bezel, actually, with the sloped bezel, it does actually flow into the dome, but it's the double dome crystal. Sorry about that. In terms of comparable models, guys, while some brands race to the bottom to offer the cheapest mechanical GMTs, which is great for the market, Vaer took the high road and went with, you know, the more expensive option to power their more affordable mechanical GMT option, guys, because they do have a more upscale, more expensive Swiss Made GMT, right, with a traditional movement there that's not going to even offer the quote unquote true GMT or flyer or traveler's GMT style, and those are in $1,000 price point. So the cool thing is, guys, for less money you can get one that you might enjoy even more and will find more useful in terms of you know, for actual travel. Yeah, sure, they could have gone with the Seiko NH34 and saved on cost, and you know, it would have been easier for them to more comfortably compete in terms of specs and build quality at around $600, but instead they stepped up and decided to take on some of the top micro brands, guys. You know, other brands that have this movement that really stand out for me are going to be brands like Notice, brands like Jack Mason, and there's tons of others, but those two, just in my head off the top, those are two brands that I really, really love, and they have some models that I really, really love that are packing these. And I have to say, this is Vaer. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it to, like, I knew it was going to look nice and everything, but I wasn't expecting, I think, just the overall way that everything kind of came together. I appreciate that. The quality, this bracelet choice. Yeah, you can save some money and not get this bracelet, but I have to say that bracelet amplifies it. I had it when I was kind of testing it out on a Tropic strap that comes with a Tropic style strap. It was cool. But yeah, on the Jubilee, it just does something special. So yeah, I thought that was awesome. Bottom line, guys, for me, Vaer have always nailed their branding and customer experience, right? Just because that's the nature of their brand and the way that it was set up. So it is really awesome to see them now excelling on the product front as well, and really challenging themselves to be even more competitive within the fierce enthusiast market. Like, we're some of the toughest people to make happy, right? Watch enthusiasts, because we nitpick and, you know, we compare and we try to derive all these monetary assignments in terms of value proposition. So that, yeah, that Vaer, this fun, hip, well-marketed, well-exposed brand, actually said, hey, well, we want to offer something that feels really great on the wrist as well. Nice to touch, nice to interact with, nice to wear. Yeah, I think that's cool because they definitely didn't have to do that. They have plenty of other options that are out there, and yeah, this is a very competitive market and can be quite saturated. And yeah, this one is just a cool one. I'm pleasantly surprised by how well everything came together. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Oh yeah, and one big shout out to Vaer for sending this piece in so that I could share it with you guys. So big thank you to Vaer for sponsoring this episode. So thanks, guys.